that Seagate III would reappear, roughly every 10 years possibly, so we might have expected mid-90s there will be something around, particularly because Dundee poetry was going through a golden period during that time. John Burnside, Bill Herbert, Don Patterson and others all emerging into the light, but all those years passed and there was no Seagate III in the 90s, nor in the noughties. And it was not really until we pitched an idea for a retrospective anthology of Dundee poetry going back over 6 centuries that Bill Herbert and I came again to that idea of Seagate III. But we had a little matter of Whaleback City to put together beforehand. And if you've not bought Whaleback City, or you've not read it, or you've not heard of it, then your chance has come today, because we're selling that as well outside. And that really is quite a landmark for the city, because it kind of summed up where we'd been in 6 centuries. And Whaleback was a great piece of work, took a lot of effort. Seagate III's taken slightly less effort, but this is maybe more significant almost, because this is where we're going. This is the 21st century route from Dundee into the poetry future. Society and its poets are much more mobile maybe than in 1984, so as a consequence the scene that we maybe call now a scene that centres on Dundee spreads really out into Angus, into Fife, Perthshire and beyond. So the geographical focus of this is maybe not quite as central Dundee, and it's slightly outside the city limits. After a protracted period of fundraising and editorial footering on my part, Seagate III arrived in August of this year. It was made possible through the financial support, not of the Scottish Arts Council this time, but the Tay Trust, and very fitting, the D.C. Thompson Trust, who both were very generous in their support for the publication. And also, really, without Anna Day and Peggy Hughes, two of the giants of the backroom giants of Dundee literature at the moment, they were really patient and resourceful and energetic about what we were trying to do, and it's partly to them that we owe the publication. And also, of course, the generosity of our 45 contributors, some of whom we'll be hearing from shortly, some who are in the audience but won't be reading. You may have an opportunity when we do Seagate IV, possibly. I'd also like to thank a few people who were involved in the publication as well. Chris Collins, who did our typesetting, and also Greg Stott and Christine Matthews, who very generously contributed the photographs which we discovered, which I'm sure if you pick up a copy you'll realise are marvellously evanescent images of the area the book is centred on, Waterstones, also stocking it as well, which we thank them for. And I should add that despite the inflation since 1984, it's only risen in price by 99 pence, $4.99. My biggest thanks, however, go to someone who we can't thank in person and isn't here to accept them. James C.Q. Stewart, our Jim. He was a huge help in the selection process and also in the advisory capacity that's necessary for someone as ill-advised as me. My name might be the one on the cover as editor, but his name is watermarked into nearly every page, and there are very few poets who are in the book who have not, in some point in their life, writing or personal, enjoyed Jim's support, enthusiasm, wisdom, encouragement. Many of the new crop of writers have come through the MLit program, and Jim was instrumental in the success of that. So well done to those of you who are now fully fledged writers in their own right. I would give absolutely anything to sit with him again in the DCA that Tuesday morning when we had a stack of manuscripts to go through, an endless supply of coffee, and at the end a very gladdened heart, and we knew we were onto something. Jim would have been delighted to see Seagate III appear, and in his usual modest way would have played down the debt which this publication owes to him. What better way, therefore, to repay that debt, in part through the poetry, and in particular the poets who he loved so much. We'll have short readings from the absolute cream of Dundee and the area's poetry, and the names are as follows. They may well introduce themselves, but if they fail to do that, I'll tell you who they are. Roderick Manson, Beth McDonald, Lydia Robb, Brian Johnston, Dawn Wood, John Quinn, Sandra Ireland, Notbrook Taylor, Lindsay McGregor, Josephine Jules Andrews, Forbes Brown, Neil Robertson, Nikki Robson, Gerard O'Brien, Joan Lennon, Richard Watt, Jane Basten, Gavin Cameron, and our City Macker, who we're very proud to have with us today, Bill Herbert, and also to Ellie McDonald, who can't be here today, but she is the only person to appear in all 3 Seagates, so her part will be taken by Lydia Robb. I'm going to start, though, with a poem from Jim. He submitted 3 poems to the book. Everything was done blind, so we didn't know who had submitted what. So it was a proper double-blind, peer-reviewed approach we took in keeping with education. So Jim didn't have his name on the poems, but I knew it was him. Chicks. All day, the whining of the chicks, pigeon or gull, depending on their mothers, gawky on the lawns and under trees. Always she returns, and then this wheedling till she gives what's in her gorge. The pigeons a flurry of fussing wings, the gulls abject. Above them and around, the air is full of the clucks and screams of bonding or, in warning, the ack-ack of hostilities. There too, crooning wantons cruise for hot flesh, rueful with seed. Throughout this pluming cackle, this traffic of cries, all day unignorable, the whine of chicks that want the meaning of their sound rendered into forage they can live on. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Seagate writers. They'll be on and off very quickly, so if you don't like the one you're listening to, there'll be another one along in a minute.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Jim. I am Beth McDonald, but here I'm my father's hip replacement, okay? The hipster. Oh, give me the firesides of farting old fuckers whose crumpet kicks off with cocoa and jam. 80. He's mine. I'll slot in just fine. Take me home. The Doric for socks. I don't give a toss, but I see that they're thick and stuffed into boots, which are scarily fuzzy with knickwacks. So who is this codger who climbed Cotopaxi and is pictured with people strung out on the picos? This rampant old grandpa swings monkey ring things, high Tarzans the lengths and the baths. So soon he'll be stripping off mockings of surgical stockings. He's ditching his crutches. He's clipping on crampons. Thank you.
I'm still suffering from jet lag, sorry. So if I fall over, somebody might pick me up. Thanks to Andy and thanks to dear Jim. This is called Sixth Birthday, and it was written many years ago. When I was a child, I had an aunt who thought she was the height of fashion, and her main item was a dead fox strung round her neck, guts removed. Sixth birthday. Consider this old snapshot, the corner of a sepia room, a Bakelite wireless, Vera Lynn on the tip of its tongue, candles flickering on my birthday cake. Note the auntie in the peep-toe shoes, black hair fizzing with the latest perm, the fox fur stole. Rust-coloured, bushy tail, malevolence in the glass eyes. I couldn't bring myself to touch the fur. Go on, stroke, she urged, her black cat cigarettes scribbling out smoke. It won't bite. When night declared itself, and I had blown the candles out, the fox's mask slipped in to haunt the dark. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Johnston. It's an honour to be in this anthology, particularly as not only do I come from Fife, but I come from the other side of the watershed, right overlooking the Forth. But Dundee is my nearest city, and I come here a lot, so glad to be in it. The poem is called Title. That is the title of the poem. It's for an old neighbour of mine who died quite a while ago, so I'd like to dedicate it to him, for Harry Barlow. Title. The bungalow you built in '58 still stands, and all bar one, the trees you planted for a wood. The only absentee, an ash, fell victim to a gale you lived to see, but not to hear the chainsaws whine as our neighbour took it out. All those, the trees, the saplings sprouting from their seed, you showed me not a month before you died, talked me round the policies and named the ones you'd planted, quite as far as to your bottom fence, the boundary you never walked me to before. And now each autumn dusk, the starlings bank and swirl, waiting for the light to fade, the sun to slip behind the law. Their day is done. As one they swoop into the branches of the wood you grew across the way, chitter there together as the night comes on.
I'm Dawn Wood. I'm going to read 2 short poems from this wonderful anthology, and I'm pleased to notice, after discussing with Lydia where it is on the cover, that the dark bit on the right part of the cover is St. Paul's Episcopal Cathedral, and the first poem I'm going to read happened in that very place. All Saints. It might be just what we need, or the last thing that we need, given the car park charges kicking in at noon. This list of our diocesan saints, the intercessor has especially researched, legions of them, and after that sermon and a half, the mic wasn't on? Will I start again? No, too loudly. Some of us didn't have tassels to fidget with. The point of the text, such that a light bulb 20 feet above the nave took it to heart and transcended the self with a crack as loud as gunshot in the effort of letting light in, as would a saint. And this is proof. Proof. If the print run that is love outstrips us from our grave clothes, then we are not spared. Our wounds are neither necessary nor enough. Thank you.
I'm John Quinn. Microphone. Do you want? Having been the second city of Scotland during the Renaissance, Dundee then became Jutopolis for around 150 years, and there were 125 jute chimneys on the skyline. There's only one left today, which is Cox's Stack in Lochee, aka Little Ireland. And this is Cox's Stack. Italianate, campanile, oligarch folly, born 300 feet in an Irish-Scots sky, giving a universe the finger. Built of dried blood bricks and the rough mortar of hubris. Last chimney standing amid the detritus of a fallen and a risen city. The ramrod's gone, the vandals come to silent killing floors, where halfling forebears scurried like Morlocks between nether worlds of dust machines and infanticide of hearing. Spinning girls of golden fibre and bronze farthings watched women weave a women's town, saw suffragettes, and grown boys become men elsewhere. Some stayed and listened to kettle tunes, flirted with revolution, and ignored the band of hope. The foremen got revolvers once, but briefly held their fire until the Western Front. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandra Ireland. Thanks to Andy and to Jim for including me in this anthology. My poem's called Low Ebb. I'm still awake at first light, conspicuous like that planet I see from your window. Venus, I think, still visible at dawn beside that pale, broken earring of a moon. As I leave your house, thin shards of light glance off the sea, and the final scudding remnants of night are impaled like wool on the blue wire of the horizon. The tide is out. I have the beach to myself, and there's something of me about it, hollowed out, washed clean, exposed. Along the shoreline, rivulets well up, deep wheels of salt water, chasing the tide, each fisher franked with my insomniac boots and the star stamp of wading birds. I passed the stump we thought would look good in your garden. It was immovable, and you wouldn't ask for help. It has been burned, I notice, deep at the core, out of flesh the colour of sea sponge, malleable but indestructible. I think of the coming tide and all that it will bring with it, but for now, a breathing space at low ebb. Thank you.
Not Brooke Taylor, and this is called Tongues and Bullets. How did she thrive on blue roses and dragons, on mottos and daggers, on the wisdom she learned from tongues and bullets, on luck, on what was beneath her skin, not the tattoos, I mean the blood, her strength, her gift for reinvention. She had eyes that glowed. She had eyes that glittered. She had positive thought. She knew that the present could dictate the future, but I don't know if she believed it. Sorry, lost my place. She would sit opposite me and play a kazoo. The music was naked. Her red eye makeup brought to mind poppies and war. Her fingers drew attention, sly glances. Her fingers drove some men wild, but sometimes she used them to rip her own flesh. Love turned a deaf ear to her conversations, but love came to her fingers like wasps returning to the nest. She was so much more than an idea. Once she said, "You look sad," and up until that moment I hadn't known, but I was sad. She knew I wanted to be held simply because she too wanted to be held. Her art was in knowing things by instinct. This girl was pure voodoo. So stacked, so edible, so broken. A tree staging alone in a field, secretly yearning for the hum and chatter of the forest. I knew one boy who called her Lake Fire, but he wouldn't divulge the origin of the term. She was a girl with boyish charm. She was a woman, a prism. She was the captain of the ship, a doodle in someone's sketchbook, a bare-chested Amazon, fatal, pure Lipizzaner. She was an endless poem. She was a spit, an isthmus, reaching out into the bleak and lonely. She was layers on layers on layers. And I could have been her father, her brother, her lover, but I was none of these things. In the end, she was another human being, a moment, a blossom in a garden. And in that way, I loved her, passing her in the world, silently, wishing her peace and the tenderness of others.
Lindsay McGregor. The retirement of the Mrs. Shaw. After 40 years of object lessons, taking tea for temperance, classroom disinfection in this profession, so trying on both mind and body, enjoy well-earned rest, this Davenport, dressing case and silver inkstand. You've moulded characters of countless Brown Street boys and girls for war and mill work. 3 cheers. And a poem called Association of Women Clerks and Secretaries. The association took the great auk as their symbol, or the gairfowl, and sadly both the association and the bird are since extinct. Those queens of cigarettes and ginger wine were often bought by men with brittle flowers for buttonholes. No two were alike, despite the fine-painted lines, their insistence on outcrops and ledges, the diets of fish, their refusal to nest. Many were clubbed till they loosened their feathers, flightless, ready for death. They could never have flourished in Arctic conditions. They'd be taken for witches. Now, addled in shallows of bureaus and tightly lipped drawers, they follow the wake of the gairfowl. Thank you.
Sadly, Jim Stewart wasn't the only poet who was accepted for publication but never, unfortunately, lived to see the publication. John Drummond, who some of you from the university will remember as Professor of Nursing, for many years wrote poetry and for many years refused to submit it to anywhere. And I eventually persuaded him to send a few things in. So this is the only published poem he ever received. John Drummond, how do you know when you are dead? You sit in restaurants, but don't get served. You look for the loved. They wander out of view. Everyone is leaving. Only you are left. You know you are dreaming and will soon wake up, yet it doesn't seem to work that way. Not anymore. Something permanent has happened. You are confused. You have run your course. There is no way back. You are not used to this. No connection on your smartphone. No emails coming in, Facebook friends all gone. You feel bereft, scared. Why won't the darkness come? You have been blindsided, spinning in the clamour and the flow. Someone got their signals crossed. Your genes are scattered across the earth, the world. Then comes the dimming. That's when you know.
Hello everyone, I'm Josie Andrews and I feel hugely privileged to be amongst you all. Thank you Andy, thank you Jim for including me. I also feel extremely privileged to have had Jim Stewart as my poetry tutor way back when I was doing the MLit in creative writing and practice at the University of Dundee. When I submitted my first poem into Jim, I had a huge disclaimer, a 2-page email about what was wrong with the poem. I know many of you will recognize that feeling. And what did Jim do? He sent me back a 3-page close reading of my poem, an unpicking of my disclaimer, which the ultimate end was something like, you've got a whole theory of poetry in there, Josie. And there was one line that I still refer to this day, which spurs me on with my writing practice. And that was the one line that he ended his email with. And it was, Josie, I urge you to see what is good in this poem. So I'm going to read 2 little poems written in grief. So much of all our writing seems to come from a sense of loss, and these 2 would be among them. The thing to do. I kissed him, but he wasn't there. It was like kissing a piece of his clothing left with me by mistake. In loving it, I felt self-conscious, aware of my madness. But it seemed to be the thing to do. In my locket. In my locket, there's a space, a place for a souvenir. A snip of hair, a photo, or ring, but no solid thing is there. In my locket is heart-shaped air, a tiny part of you.
This poem is by Ellie McDonald, and I hope I give it its proper Scots atmosphere. As Andy said, she had the distinction of being in all of the 3 Seagate anthologies, which is brilliant. OBrien is the title. We bigot the hoose with sandstone was, slates ve Ballahoolish, a path of Caithness slab, we a round tree at the fit, where brambles and thistles fought for space. Our door was aye wide to the wa, till yon lang dark winter came, wi' its coarse wind that hurled hail water o'er the hoose, and girt the round tree itself with a spate. We hunkered doon, share that the foons could had, nothing ever connacht, till the ghasties hook and birl o'er the merlins. You man I think on, come spring, yon chittering round will racks itself to the licht, to stand colour green again, for net a cindering world. Thank you.
Well, my name's Forbes Brown, a member of the Brockley Ferry Eco Poets, as are several other folk who are contributing. This poem came out of a session we had down by the grassy beach. It started off roughly in English and then ended up in Scots. Gersey Foreland. Gang for it along the tide, bricht sparks, strinklet aroon. Move among them, see their flickert colours. Gersey Foreland, they cry it. What about all these spats and springs again the dreich brown and green? Yellows, blaze, pigs, cramasses. But say eth our look at, we are the bra graithen of the boats. Tapselteary house, fakes a rape, and skelly bladders. Tuck tent on the Eindon dirlin o' cordals, and masts shuggling in the wind. It's like the wee yochs are roxen to brack their grips and lay their hapshackles on their gersey flowery brews for the scooth of the firth and the room sea.
Right, whoops. Change spectacles. Hello, I'm Neil Robertson, and a few years back, Forbes and I were involved with, as members of the Broughton Eco Poets, with seasonal celebrations in the open air, and this one was written for February the 2nd, Imbolc or Candlemas, and it was originally read on a very dark February morning. So, a new tune on an old piano. It's been cast out here all winter in the dunes, winds strumming soft chords on frosted strings, whistling through warped boards, counterpoint to the waves sang harmonium. The tunings are all gone, the notes muffled by encroaching sand. A few strings twang like a banjo in an unheard key. Half the keys are stuck, others hammer unresponsive air. It won't be long before the whole thing falls apart. To crumble in the marram grass and rust in the sea, the last notes dispersing in the winds to all directions of the sky. But now the year turns, and the sun's plain chant rises in our ears and in our hearts to rouse us on this February morning and make a new song for this old piano.
I'm Nikki Robson. This poem is based on an entry in the Dundee Asylum records around 1851. It's called Number 34. She was delicate, silken before weave and weft listened, and she bloated thick and coarse, her mind a coffin weighed down with soil. There is a frog, she says, a frog inside, and when he wakes, he disdains her desire to a leap, and she's all tense-thighed, pointed toes. Her tongue flicks to wrap my neck, to pull me in, to plunge. When he sleeps, she sleeps, and I sink into blanket weed and pull, wishing it was her who claimed me, that her eyes didn't green when she left.
Hello there, my name is Ed Broughton. I was born in Dublin but grew in Dundee. My poem is called Goodbye Victor. I walked to the window. You walked to the window. You know why I got this hotel room. When I go back there, the room is empty. No pencil-thin man, no walking distractedly above me, naked to reach your phone. No more dancing closer, drunken kisses. Your hand-spanned waist. Your dark skin and my pale chest. Coffee and cream, you said. You walk away. You got that call. You dress in pedestrian manner. I dress resigned. I walk with you to a bus that comes too soon. The hotel room is empty. When I return to the room, it is empty. Where is Honduras anyway?
Hello, my name is Joan Lennon, and I have two small poems to read. The first one is based on the month of March. March, tree, field, sun. Emphatic as ink, black shadows print themselves across the grass. Bold statements, translating at 90 degrees, another tree. Unsmudged by leaves, this stark calligraphy does not include the word for cloud. And the second poem is based in the depth of a Scottish summer. They said, write about what you know. It's cold today, and I am writing about crocodiles. Sat here within earshot of the North Sea, midsummer in a cardie, hardly a likely locale for river ambush, jaw clamp, death roll. But hey, bugger advice. I'm writing about crocodiles anyway.
Hello, Richard Watt. I was fortunate enough to have Jim as a tutor for several classes in the early years of the last decade. And the last time I saw him at Platform Poetry this year, he said something to me that was so encouraging that it almost moved me to tears. And that was a reflection of how much I thought of him. This is called The Dungeon Master's Guide, and it's written from memory of my youth, and it's about pretending to be other people, but putting away childish things in every way. Before I knew my own body and its basilisks penned in the calendar, and before I turned up plastered in the trident halls with guardian mare, I dodged blind archers who wounded at random from the ziggurat steps, scaled outraged idols, retrieved rock eggs from their high haunches just for the experience, restored a cyclopean tomb built from spell books, stacked to high heavens. and sprung myself from the Magister's clutches with mere cantrips and hex paper, which were then locked solemnly away like saintly bones into the loft, where our imaginations go between flits and sometimes stay. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Jane Basten and I'm very, very pleased to be involved and included in this anthology. The two short poems I'm going to read are from a sequence of poems that I've written about loss, and they're both dedicated to Salim. The day after you died, the frost revealed our hearted initials embossing the window pane. Now, on winter nights, I dream of interlocking crystals clinging clear and still. I lust for frost. The second one is slightly later in the sequence, and it was written after a visit to Tesco's. It's called Friday. I resurrected you today, in between the wine and bread. Encouraged by a chatty checkout girl, I limned the days that lay ahead. The family outings, the special meals, our everyday life laid bare. She smiled and nodded, unaware of the wound so deep that cannot heal. It lays quiet and still, not dead, ready to merge the longed for and the real. In between the wine and bread, I resurrected you today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a few housekeeping announcements. Please switch off all electronic devices and all irrational thoughts. There will be a short break approximately halfway through, and a long breakdown in which the bar will serve coffee and tea and sympathy and happy pills. We're not expecting a fire drill, nor a crisis of conscience, so if the alarm bell sounds, it's a real thing. Exits are here, here, and up here. Enjoy the show and have a nice life.
Hello, I'm Roderick Manson. One night in the wonderful Esther Reid's creative writing class, she asked if anyone knew of a diary poem she could use. And as it happened, I did. The only problem was I hadn't actually written it yet. So 4 verses came that night, another 10 the next morning, and if you think this poem is long, bear in mind, 30-odd lines were killed or seriously wounded in the crossfire. Jim was kindly about this poem, and I was grateful to him. It's a First World War poem. It's called Words from the Front. 1st July. We marched through France from flowers to graves, with the skirl of the pipes and the shell-burst drums to light the way. It fired the heart. 8th July. We had the sermon in the trench as the chaplain prayed for death and blood. Christ seemed a stranger here. 10th July. We housed the lice and fed them well, and if they cared for rotting feet, they had that too. It was their place and time. 15th July. We told the old story of the sergeant crucified with bayonets on the stable door, then stabbed and shot. It was the evil others do. 18th July. We watched the drunken surgeon hack off limbs, pruning the race to the screams of those who could not faint. We envied him his gin. 20th July. We saw a man sink in the mud and the stink, drowning in the green of his liquefied lungs. It was so far away through the mask. 25th July. We mowed the enemy in howling ranks like corn in the fields back home, and laughed. It was like breaking sticks. 28th July. We watched the stretcher bearers scurry like mice, seeking the least direct line to the fallen hold like cheese. It was a banquet with a taste of flesh. 30th July. I found a slip on the wall of the trench can be fatal, as the whistle blew and the officer fired. In the blink of my life, it seemed over the top. 1st August. Your son, killed in action. Regrets, formal. The lie, official as truth can be when buried in the glory mire. As ever, thank you for listening.
Good evening, I'm Bill Herbert. Isn't it nice to be reading with pals? Let's face it, it's even nice to be reading with people who don't like you. But it's lovely to see so many of you here today, and thank you all for coming. We're moving towards the final part now. I'll read 2 poems quite briefly. The first one is just a little true story from the Ard Blackness scale. When I was a child, the Queen came to visit us all, and there was this kind of procession of the school down to the Perth Road, waiting for the limousine to go by. And unfortunately, I'm going to mention the real name of this guy. I hope he's not in the audience today. Bolly Donaghy got so excited by this that he, not to put it too delicately, crapped himself. And do you know in the Catalan tradition they have this thing called the caganer, a little squatting figure that they put at the back of the kind of the Christmas display of the manger and Mary and all that. Right at the back, there's always a wee man just doing one, and it's a kind of a way of bringing things back to earth. And so this one is called the Blackness Caganer. Wally Donaghy, I tell nae lie, shat his pants as the Queen drove by. Kids a lined the Ard Perth Road, and Bully squatted like a toad. Blackness scales ain khaki knave as the black car passed with a gracious wave. To the bairns wha laughed and grat and howled, and the Republican in Billy's bowels. Later, telt he screeve a poem, I thocht of the Queen and her wee brown gnome, and ever since sign a limousine has for me a fecal gleam. Well, 30-odd years, yeah. I'm going to read a doldrum to finish with, and I started writing doldrums in the 80s when nothing seemed to be happening in Dundee. Now, everything's happening in Dundee. It's just me that nothing's happening to. So it's 30-odd years since Seagate, 30-odd years since the doldrums, but time means nothing to the imagination. You know, these things can pass in the blink of an eye, and yet the imagination is inevitably bound up within it. And it's great to think of Jim at this point, actually, because, you know, I said pals, but pals are absent as well as present. and a town is a series of absences as well as a series of presences. And this poem is now the 24th doldrum, and it's about the falling of the bridge, that moment when the gap appears and the train goes down into the water. And I was thinking about that gap. Oh, yeah. Thinking about that gap as a kind of moment of absolute clarity and absolute disaster at the same time. And these are the moments that we encounter again and again in our lives. These are the moments of loss. These are the moments of trauma. These are the moments in which we lose our friends and our families. So that's a definition of a doldrum, if ever I heard one, and this is the 24th doldrum. To loup into nothing, the hale train flen, into nocht, into nicht, into north. Steam wings folded and fawn, the skreek o moonlicht, in the gleik o midnight. We hastuur as the demon of the air, and buster for an engineer. Afore you hit the water, the gas lights glitter like quartz and black sand. You thought you'd understand. You thought there was something to be understood. Thon gap, rebrigged, has differed space for space, while in it, by some grace, awe's suspended, nae one's deed, no yet, nor for ilka time succeeding. Ilka crossing is the same, although the rivers know time's tamed and makes a doldrum for disaster, eternity for this a day.
I'd like to finish with a poem from Jim Stewart, but I've just realised I've left my book where I've just stood up from. They also serve. Jim wrote 3 poems for the book, and each one, as I say, imbued with his personal stamp, the nature poetry that he was so preeminent in. This is After Rain. Steam drifts off the low roof after rain. The windows open. A great bee booms on the glass, its redundant weight. It shouldn't be able to fly, not with that abdomen slung on its thorax, not with that bum, but there it is. Small wings, a blur, fat belly hung on their frailty, tapping the pain in need to get to the bushes, its doomy burr and delicate lumbering all bump and growl. It'll let you guide it by hand. You only have to steer it a touch to the left, take some bad mouthing. It'll give you the wind of its wings, its passing draft, without thanks, blind to your purpose. And that, ladies and gentlemen, means Seagate III is now officially launched. I'd like to thank all the poets once again, those who stood up and read and those who contributed. And if you're sitting in the audience and you've not read today, then I apologise for not finding space for you, but thank you, all of you. I'd like to thank the Dundee Literary Festival. In this incredible 5-day event, they managed to find time for what really matters, I think. Local people in their own voice, reading their own words. But Peggy Hughes particularly I'd like to thank, the indefatigable Peggy, for giving us that space. Seagate IV will return in 2015. No, 2000. Do you know, I've spent all day working at the punchline, and then you fluff it. Okay. Seagate IV will return in 2025. And I'll get my glasses sorted out by then. I believe there is wine to be, oh yes, wine at the back. So if you stay for a few moments and do enjoy with us the free wine that you weren't expecting, but which is now here. And when you've all got a glass, we might just raise a toast to our friend Jim. So help yourself, and thank you for coming.